Hi, my name is Alex Dolphin and welcome back to another episode of Ex Ante. Today we're going to discuss the case of State Farm Insurance Corporation versus Campbell. This case was heard in the United States Supreme Court in the year of 2003. Let's go ahead and jump into the case. So the Campbells were driving their car in a rural area of Utah on a highway, and they were driving this car and they went to pass on a two-lane highway. And when they did so, they got into the other lane, so now they're approaching head-on traffic. They don't see this other car coming head-on. This other car does see the Campbells coming head-on. This car swerves out and then collides with another car and causes a two-vehicle accident. The Campbells don't actually get hit, but these other two cars do. These two cars, one gentleman dies and the other person sustains some pretty serious injuries. So these two cars that swerved out of the way to not hit the Campbells because the Campbells were doing a wrongful passing, the court determines, then go ahead and sue the Campbells. Campbells were insured by State Farm, so State Farm is kind of handling this claim for the Campbells. The insurance policy limit for the Campbells was $50,000. So both of these people come to State Farm and they say, hey, we know the limit, we know it's capped at 50 grand, just pay us 50 grand, we don't need to go to court, we can just forget about this. State Farm says, no, we want to go to court. So they do go to court, and the jury returns a verdict much higher than the settlement would have been. It's closer to $200,000. So the Campbells are obviously really frustrated with this. Their insurance policy was meant to protect them, and now it seems like the insurance agent himself tried to actually hurt them, right? It went to a much higher judgment than what would have just been paid if the insurance corporation would have just settled. So they file a lawsuit against State Farm, and they allege fraud, duress, bad faith in business dealings, just a myriad of tort actions, just saying that what State Farm did was wrong in its business dealings. So this case between the insurance company and the Campbells gets bubbled up to the Utah Supreme Court. And the Utah Supreme Court looks at this and they find what State Farm did to be especially egregious. They write quite an opinion about how it's just really bad business dealings. This was totally wrong. This was fraud on every level. And if, all the people in the nation that have State Farm experience this type of fraud, it would be terrible. So we should punish them. And so they assess a punitive damage of $145 million against State Farm Insurance Corporation. You can imagine the Campbells are super excited at this point. There's a compensatory damage of $1 million. So that's just saying, hey, this is what you did. You won your tort case. Here's $1 million. But then there's a punitive damage, so the punishing element from the state coming down for $145 million, which is quite high. State Farm then appeals this to the United States Supreme Court, and they say, you're robbing me of my due process, an equal protection underneath the law, due process. They go ahead and use the 14th Amendment argument to try and say these punitive damages are too high. And so the United States Supreme Court, they have a test that they interpret punitive damages through. It was developed in a case called BMW versus Gore. This was a case where someone bought a BMW. It was painted the wrong color at the dealership. They were really mad about this. They alleged fraud. They got a small compensatory damage, but they got like a $4 million punitive damage. So it seemed really high just for getting a BMW that was painted the wrong color. And so the court develops this test in Gore. It's a three-pronged test, and I'll just read it out for you because the court does use it here. It says, 1, the degree of the reprehensibility of the defendant's misconduct. 2, the disparity between the actual or potential harm suffered by the plaintiff and the punitive damages. And 3, the difference between the punitive damages awarded by the jury and the civil penalties authorized or imposed in comparable cases. So this decision is authored by Justice Kennedy, and Justice Kennedy says that what the Utah Supreme Court did in its interpretation of Gore was totally wrong. This punitive damage was much too high for what was actually going on here. He says that it's really not that reprehensible. What's going on? It's just business dealings. And then 2, he says that the Utah Supreme Court tried to assess penalties for the whole nation. And he says, Utah Supreme Court can't assess penalties for the whole nation and not for everyone that just, could have a potential issue with State Farm. They have to assess the penalties on the case at hand. And if you're just assessing the penalties on the case at hand, $145 million is far too large of a number. That number needs to be much smaller. And Justice Kennedy says that would be the highest that he could really see punitive damages going, except for crazy scenarios, would be 9x. So if your compensatory damages are $1 million, your punitive damages would then be $9 million. I mean, that's just for the case at hand, right? The reason why you'll see much larger punitive damages sometimes in, class actions or things like that is because there's many cases brought together. Whereas here, it's just one party. It's just Campbell's versus State Farm. So the punitive damages are, limited significantly. On remand, this goes to the Utah Supreme Court, and they actually pretty much just adopt Justice Kennedy's calculation and say, hey, we're going to give the Campbells $9 million, and we'll move on. So that's the case. Just a little bit of an ex-ante discussion of this case. There's a world where all these people are also getting targeted with this type of business practice by, State Farm. And it's harder for them to collectively come together and file a class action lawsuit. It's hard for them to get their voices in one unified front. And that's really expensive, and sometimes maybe it would be easier to punish bad actors if we did just take the Utah Supreme Court approach and saw that, hey, there's one opportunity in front of us to assess damages, and we can see that State Farm's doing something fraudulent, so let's just blanket it across the whole nation. The other side of that is that, courts have a responsibility to only discuss cases that are in front of them, and they can't, make decisions on cases that aren't in front of them. And so this punitive damage calculation it's in tune with that principle that you have to decide the cases it's presented towards you, and you can't just pull something out of thin air and, decide your own law the way you want to there. So that's the video. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see more, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye-bye.